Good morning. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and it's time finally for another Music Month video. It's been ages since I've done one of these. And for those of you who don't know what Music Month is, it's when I choose 5 songs and 1 album that I feel represent a certain mood or theme or genre. And as part of the reason that I didn't make one of these videos for so long was because I was suffering with a little bit of anxiety and stress and whatnot, I thought I would make my funnest Music Month yet, and that's music that sounds like anxiety attacks. Sort of. Not all of them do. I didn't actually have like an extensive list of music that I felt sounded like an anxiety attack, but some of the music does sound like that, and some of the music is just stuff that I found very cathartic, not always in a good way necessarily, I guess, but very in tune with how your brain is feeling when you're going through those periods of time. So some of it's quite stressful and some of it's just a little bit depressing, but I hope you enjoy this. As always, there will be a link in the description to a Spotify playlist of all of these tracks. So let's just get started. Track 1 on the list is by none other than Keaton Henson. I obviously couldn't do a musical list like this without including him at least once. The track is called Elevator Song and is from his, I think, 2013 release Romantic Works. Stunning, beautiful, gorgeous album in general, but Elevator Song is the opening track from it, and the piece of music was actually written based on his own experience of having a panic attack in an elevator when he was going to, I think this is how the story goes, I think he was going to perform at a show and he got into a lift and he just couldn't do it, and then he basically ran away from the theatre. So really powerful piece of music. It starts off with these 2 repeated piano notes, which is reminiscent of another track that I'll talk about next, and then as that's repeating, these strings just start coming in gradually, building and repeating and building and repeating and getting more and more tense and more stressful the more you listen. And there's some general room recordings and Foley sounds going on in the background as well, which usually I dislike. I find it detracts from it, but in this instance, I mean, Keaton Henson is one of the few people that can use, you know, general field recordings really well and to enhance the impact of the music itself, and this is a perfect example of that. Also, on a side note, there's a fantastic remix by Ulrich Strauss, or Schnaus, I can't remember his name, but Ulrich something did an amazing remix of that song. So if you listen to Elevator Song, also listen to his remix. The next piece of music is by Arvo Pärt and is called Cantus in Memoriam Benjamin Britten, and I think was actually part of the inspiration for Keaton Henson's track Elevator Song. I can remember when I saw Keaton Henson live, Cantus in Memoriam Benjamin Britten was playing as one of the kind of pre-show tracks, and I've heard him mention in interviews before that he's a huge fan of his work, as am I, and this is just a wonderful, distressing piece of music. Starts off with this repeated tubular bell just kind of hammering a funeral toll, because as the name would suggest, it's a song in memory of Benjamin Britten. I think, anyway. Hopefully my Latin has still stayed with me from school. But yeah, you get this repeated funeral toll, and then these strings start playing these haunting and unnerving patterns in the background that repeat and build, and it's a perfect marriage of dissonance with this kind of descending pattern, and it just gets really stressful, like super stressful. It's a bit scary to listen to sometimes, and it definitely gives you the feeling of kind of raw mourning and loss and death, as opposed to just being kind of sad death, because you get like a sad piece of music that's written in memoriam of someone, but then you can also get these ones which is actually just about the really strong, overwhelming, like, horribleness of it all. You know, it's not a kind of, this is sad but we can remember it nicely. It's just a, this is fucking brutal. Next, track 3 on the list, we have a little bit more of a gentle track compared to the last 2. It's Chris Zabriskie and it's called I Am a Man Who Will Fight for Your Honor. Now, I know that the title kind of makes it sound like a piece of music that you have to wear a fedora to listen to properly, but trust me, it is a really beautiful piece of music. Starts off with this mellow, sort of Rhodesy sounding progression, and it just builds and builds. Now, this isn't necessarily the kind of music that would make you feel anxious in the way that the previous 2 did, but what I found with it is that it's much more of an introspective track. It's the kind of music that if you're not in a great mindset already, you're walking home by yourself from work and it's dark and you've just got this playing in your ears, then it just makes you sort of turn in on yourself and get really reflective. Not always in a good way either. It can kind of make you realize all of your worst traits that you don't usually admit to yourself. But I find that there's something really beautiful about that, and it's not a track that I would listen to all the time, and it's not a track that would necessarily make you feel like that either. It could just be something that relaxes you and makes you feel more at peace with the world, I don't know, but that's how it affected me, and I do think it's a really lovely piece of music. Next, track 4, we've got Max Richter on The Nature of Daylight. This, I would say, wins the prize for the most depressing song on the list. Taken from his stunning album The Blue Notebooks, this track track just solicits such a powerful emotional response. I can remember when I heard it for the first time, as soon as just the very first haunting string chord swelled into the forefront of this music, I just knew I was in for an emotional ride. And this utterly tragic chord progression repeats for a while, and then you get this really delicate solo violin part that comes in. As the rest of the music just sort of builds and envelops it with its own repetition, it's just great. I fucking love Max Richter. Beautiful piece of music, but don't listen to it if you're feeling sad. Or do, I don't know. Usually when I'm sad, I like listening to sad music because it just seems a lot more cathartic than listening to happy music, because then it kind of feels like you're trying to trick yourself into feeling something that you're not. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's good to just acknowledge and absorb what you're feeling, and music can be a really, really helpful way of helping you get that kind of stuff out. And finally, track number 5 on this list is by This Will Destroy You and is called Villa de Refugio. I don't speak Spanish, so I apologize if I've got the pronunciation of that wrong. This is definitely like the sort of respite at the end of this list. If you listen to the Spotify playlist, this will be a nice sort of calming moment at the end of it all. It's certainly the most ambient offering from their masterpiece self-titled album, and it starts off with this mellow, sort of almost hopeful sounding chord progression, and similarly to the other tracks, it then just builds and builds, and it gets more and more distorted. There's this sort of noise that is just building in the background. It's about 7 or 8 minutes long, so you really need to let yourself get lost in the soundscape of it, you know, put some good headphones on and just lie down and listen to it. And then it ends with this sort of fade out, and this glitchy, stuttery stuff continues, and it's super, super beautiful and ambient, and it's just a perfect example of that kind of music. It's one of my favorite tracks off that album. Pure magic. Listen to This Will Destroy You. They are great. And now it's time for the Anxiety album, but before I tell you what that is, I just want to say again a huge thank you to all those who have contributed to the Kickstarter to get my debut EP, Her, pressed on vinyl. You're amazing. I can't believe that we've already got as far as we have. Looks like it could really happen, and it would be super, super awesome if it did. If anyone is interested in contributing to that, there's a link in the description down there to the Kickstarter. If you haven't heard my debut EP, it's a collection of 4 instrumental tracks that I produced a couple of months ago. There'll be links in the description as well to the Spotify and the iTunes for it, so it'd be awesome if you checked it out. And if anyone did want to contribute to the Kickstarter to get it pressed on vinyl, because that'd be so fucking cool if my music is on vinyl, then link down there. Thank you so much. Now, the album for this Music Month video is called Behaving by Behaving. It's a self-titled release. Not actually by anyone called Behaving, it's by Keaton Henson. Couldn't avoid mentioning him twice on this list, but this is very, very different from a lot of what you'll hear from him. I can remember when I found out that this was released, because it kind of came out of nowhere. It was when I was doing work experience with a mixing engineer and producer in Cardiff called Ramesh, and I was in the middle of a busy day with him and a band called Decade, and it was so much fun doing all of that work, but I really, really was excited to listen to this on the walk home. I was quite a long distance from where I was living at the time, and I was looking forward to walking home and just listening to this and kind of taking it all in, and I did that, and I got home and I felt like absolute shit. And some fans of his didn't like this album very much. I found with this, the more I listen to it, the more I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely genius. It's the only thing that Keaton Henson's released that's really got a lot of electronic elements to it, and his voice, which a lot of people really, really like, is always kind of morphed and processed, often taking it down and making it slower, kind of giving it this almost monstrous feel. It's such a powerful album, this, and it really makes you feel lots of things. It can make you feel quite hopeful, it can make you feel utterly depressed, it can make you feel scared, it can make you feel anxious. A really, really amazing set of songs on this. Favorite tracks would have to be Preacher. I mean, some of the lyrics in that are just crazy. Other favorites would be Vivisect. That song always slays me, and Confessional. So that is my album choice for this Music Month video, Behaving by Keaton Henson. So that concludes another Music Month video, and I would love to know what some of your favorite tracks are that would fit into that category of music that sounds like anxiety attacks, or the most depressing, anxious, stressful songs that you know. Let me know all of that down in the comment section there, and if you've listened to the tracks and the album that I've suggested today, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you love them? Do you hate them? You know, do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? I'd love to know all of your thoughts and opinions down there. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do hope you've enjoyed this. Spotify playlist for these tracks is in the description, as well as a link to the Kickstarter and my EP. Sorry to keep plugging it. I'll stop very soon, I promise. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I'll see you very soon.